So when you stand in that chamber today, lit by electric light where oil lamps once flickered, you're looking at a god that an empire tried to forget, kept alive only because someone needed his temple as a floor. Which leaves an uncomfortable thought to carry back up the stairs, past the frescoes, past the altar, into the sunlit street above. How much of what we call history is memory, carefully preserved, and how much of it is simply what happened, by chance, to be standing in the way of something built on top of it? But the evidence complicates the romance. The actual construction record at San Clemente suggests something more mundane than religious conquest. Archaeological surveys, including analysis referenced by the site's Dominican custodians and independent scholars, indicate the filling in of the Mithraeum happened primarily because the ground level of that part of Rome was already rising, and later buildings needed a stable base, the same practical process by which much of ancient Rome was built over, regardless of what stood on the ground before. Most scholars of Roman religion today, drawing on ethnographic and comparative evidence from Mithraea across the empire, are far more cautious about claims of a genuine rivalry between the two faiths, noting that Mithraism was never as widespread or as threatening to Christian authorities as the old narrative suggested. The truth, as usual, sits between conspiracy and coincidence, a temple buried not as an act of war, but as an act of urban practicality, which, in its own way, is a stranger and colder story than the myth. What that carved relief represents, ultimately, is a religion almost entirely reconstructed from what it left behind in stone. Mithraism kept no scripture that survives, wrote no theology we can read. Everything we know about what Mithras meant to his initiates, the cosmic sacrifice, the promise of salvation through blood and darkness, we know only from images like this one, repeated in shadowy rooms across the empire. The sculpture isn't just art. It's closer to the last surviving sentence of a language we can no longer fully translate. And the fact that it survived at all is almost an accident of Roman construction habits, a religion preserved not by believers, but by builders who simply needed solid ground to stand on. Above its head it was rediscovered almost by accident. In the 1860s, an Irish Dominican prior named Father Joseph Maluli, custodian of San Clemente, became convinced that the 4th century basilica beneath the current one, already known at that point, had older structures beneath it still. He began excavating, at his own initiative and largely his own expense, digging down through Roman-era walls and Republican-period foundations. What he found, layer by layer, was a nobleman's house from the 1st century, and within it, the Mithraeum, essentially intact, its altar and relief still in place beneath the packed earth that had entombed it for over a millennium. The Basilica of San Clemente, still run by the Irish Dominican order today, has published detailed archaeological accounts of the excavation, and scholars of Roman religion, including work drawing on the site published through the Pontifical Institute and various university presses on Mithraic studies, have used it as one of the best preserved examples of a Mithraeum anywhere in the former empire. The legend that grew up around Mithraism itself is almost as compelling as the excavation. For over a century, historians speculated that Mithraism was Christianity's great underground rival, a secretive, initiation-based cult so structurally similar to early Christianity, with its symbolic sacrifice, its sacred meal, its promise of rebirth, that some scholars wondered whether the church had deliberately built over Mithraic temples not just for practical foundations, but as a symbolic act of triumph. The bull's blood replaced by the wine of the Eucharist. The underground cave of secrecy replaced by the open basilica of public faith. It's a seductive theory, and for decades it shaped how Mithraism was taught. To descend beneath the Basilica of San Clemente today is to walk backward through roughly 2,000 years in the space of about 20 meters. You start in the 18th century church at street level, ordinary and sunlit. Then you go down a staircase, and you're standing inside a 4th century basilica, its frescoes still faintly visible on the walls. Then you go down again, and the air changes. It gets cooler, damper, quieter. And there, in a small vaulted chamber that once stood beneath a Roman nobleman's house, is the sculpture, Mithras, in Phrygian cap and billowing cloak, one knee pinning a bull to the ground, blade driven into its neck, a dog and a serpent reaching toward the wound, a scorpion gripping at the bull's flank. It's carved in fairly low relief, weathered, modest in scale compared to the grand marbles of imperial Rome. But standing in that chamber, lit by a single bulb in a room built to be lit only by torchlight and secrecy, the effect is not modesty. It's dread, and awe, arriving together. The mystery here isn't really about technique. Mithraic tauroctony reliefs like this one exist across the former Roman Empire, from Britain to Syria, carved by workshop sculptors following a fairly standardized template. The mystery is about disappearance. Sometime after the Mithraic cult was suppressed in the late 4th century, following Emperor Theodosius's edicts against pagan worship, this entire underground temple was deliberately filled in with rubble and used as a foundation platform for a new Christian basilica built directly above it. Not destroyed. Not looted for its marble, as so many pagan monuments were. Buried, and built over, the earliest layers pressed down like sediment beneath the new religion's church, until the very existence of the Mithraeum was forgotten entirely. Nobody living in Rome by the Middle Ages knew it was there. The relief simply vanished from memory, sealed under 15 centuries of Christian liturgy happening directly. There is a point where the ground beneath your feet stops being ground and becomes a timeline. Most buildings have a foundation. Some buildings have an argument, layer after layer of history stacked directly on top of itself, each generation building over what came before rather than clearing it away. In the heart of Rome, beneath a working Catholic basilica where Mass is still said every week, there exists exactly this kind of vertical argument. And at the very bottom of it, in the dark, sits a carved marble relief that no worshipper saw for over 1,000 years. This is the Mithraeum of San Clemente, and the sculpture buried at its heart is a depiction of the god Mithras slaying a bull.